Today's lesson is an essay by E.K. Federov entitled Climatic Change and Human Strategy. E.K. Federov was the former director of the Hydrometeorological Services in the erstwhile or former Soviet Union, and he was the second vice president of the International Meteorological Organization. Before we get into the essay, it will be good to understand that meteorology is the science that deals with the phenomena of atmosphere, especially weather and weather conditions. What is this essay about? The essay deals with the history of climatic changes over the years and the reasons for these changes. This essay should be of particular interest to the modern students and the environment because we have to be very careful in dealing with the environment. Federov argues that while climatic changes are irreversible, irreversible means something that cannot be reversed, changed back, much can be done to avoid the adverse consequences of these changes. From this statement, we have to understand that the changes or many changes that happen in climate and the planet can have adverse or harmful consequences on mankind. Because of this possible danger, he says that strategies must be followed at the local, regional and global levels. These three words, local, regional and global, makes us understand that no one is free from this responsibility. At the local level, there are things each citizen can do, that can make the world a better place. Getting into the substance of the essay, Federov talks about the impact of scientific and technological progress on natural environment. We all know that the progress of science and technology seems to be making mankind less constrained by the natural environment. When we say less constrained, we have to understand that there were times when we had to depend on seasons for certain things to be done. There were natural impediments like mountains, oceans, which prevented us from making many changes that we badly needed for a progress. Those impediments are no more impediments to mankind because science and technology has offered us plenty of solutions, tools and ideas. Today, just to cite an example, construction industry is active all year round. If you look at it from a previous time, it was highly seasonal. It is now possible to reclaim deserts for agriculture. By the word reclaim, we mean a kind of landscape that is unfit for cultivation that can be made into something of a quality of possible to bring in agriculture. So because of science and technology, it has been possible to convert deserts into agricultural pieces of land. The possibilities are so immense that it is even possible to create large and comfortable communities in the Arctic. We know that the Arctic and the Antarctic circles are known for extreme weather conditions which make inhabitation impossible. But because of the advancements in science and technology, it is even possible to create large and comfortable communities in these extremely cold environments. Continuing with the impact, Federov states that the present scale of human activity may hence be compared with naturally occurring phenomena measured by the size and duration over which it has taken place. To make us understand what is meant by the size of scale of human activity, a few examples can be stated, like the magnitude of construction, the amount of mineral resources extracted, the quantity of energy that is being developed and utilized, along with the effects of human activities on the composition of the atmosphere and hydrosphere. By atmosphere, we refer to the air that surrounds the Earth, and by hydrosphere, we refer to the water body on the Earth. Many of our actions, many of our human actions, like construction and land reclamation, are intended to last for long periods of time. It is because of this duration to which these changes are going to stay that he calls it a naturally occurring phenomena. So the size refers to the magnitude of human activity, and the duration refers to the long periods of time to which the impact of our actions are going to stay. Moreover, the planet can no longer be considered as an infinitely resilient environment. By the word resilient, we mean something that can spring back to the normal state easily. So for a long time, or it is a common notion that the planet has a resilient environment. But Federov state this concept has to be changed, or this understanding has to be corrected. The planet can no longer be considered as an infinitely resilient environment. It cannot spring back to normalcy all by itself. Secondly, he reminds us that its resources are not inexhaustible, which means if we go on with our activities without any consideration on the nature of environment, the resources might become extinct. They might no longer be available for human use. After citing these basic concepts on the planet and the natural resources, he makes us understand that this is an issue that we should be concerned about. So, if a proper assessment is not made of the present and future of our natural and transformed environments, by natural environment we mean those aspects of nature which are not tampered by human beings, and by transferred environment we mean the changes we have brought in to fit in our material and our social needs. It is likely to lead to very large cumulative errors. This is the reason why Federov brings our attention to the need to preserve climate, to avoid severe climatic changes. This assessment includes our estimates of mineral resources, average and extreme values of river discharge, precipitation, sea level, etc. By precipitation, we mean any form of condensed atmospheric moisture like rain, snow, hail, etc. To understand the impact of climatic changes and the adverse effect that it can lead to, he makes us understand what does he mean by the concept of climate. He defines climate in a very simple statement. He says that it is both a consequence and a demonstration of the workings of complex processes in the atmosphere, the oceans, and on land. If we look at this definition, we can see that even though it is stated as two simple words, consequence and demonstration, the air around us, the water around us, and the land around us have factors that decide the concept called climate. The unequal heating of the Earth's surface by the sun develops and maintains an atmospheric circulation pattern. So, from this description, we can understand that Earth is not heated uniformly by the sun. The word unequal heating says that the world or the planet is not heated equally by the sun. This is the basic reason why the circulation pattern is developed. When the air in the low equatorial region of the Earth is heated, it becomes light and it flows up towards the pole. Or that is the word shows, it ascends and flows poleward. Once it reaches the poles, it cools and it descends or it flows down. This cold air flows back towards the equator. This diagram might help us understand the simple circulation pattern that Federov explains as the basic reason for climate change. In both the poles, we can see a complete circulation pattern of air, which is due to the unequal heating of the Earth by the sun. The air heated at the equator is rising towards the poles. When at the poles they get cooled, they come down or they descend and move towards the equator, completing the circulation pattern. Besides this, there are other factors that affect the circulation of air. One among those is Earth's rotation. Second, he says, is the smaller scale circulations developed through land and sea differences. In this context, we might remember the terms sea breeze and land breeze. These factors also affect the circulation that basically create the concept of climate. There are barriers provided by major mountain ranges, which is again a factor that affect the circulation. Nevertheless, or however, the writer states that the main features of this general circulation, when averaged over a substantial period of time, seem to exhibit some continuity and permanence. And there are reasons for this continuity and permanence, which are constancy of several atmospheric and oceanic parameters. By parameters, we mean factors. So there are certain atmospheric and oceanic factors which contribute to the constancy of what we mentioned before. One is the mean and extreme temperatures. Second one is the precipitation amount. Precipitation, as I mentioned earlier, refers to any form of condensed atmospheric moisture like rain, snow, hail, etc. The third factor is the seasonal river discharge. In this essay, the writer considers climate as the totality of characteristics of the atmosphere generalized over a time period. This is how he introduces us to the basic concept of climate. From there, he moves on to say that latitudinal changes also occur, which according to him, during the last several 100 million years, the differences in climate between different latitudes was not as pronounced as it is today. Or in other words, the normal climate of the Earth as a whole was much more homogeneous than it is at present. This situation began to change about 2 million years ago. The Arctic temperatures dropped sharply. As you know, when temperatures drop, it results in ice formation. The term glacial refers to this ice formation. So he says, when the temperature in the Arctic areas dropped, there resulted a glacial period. During this period, repeated advances of ice sometimes reached mid-latitudes. He cites an example of Greenland to make us understand that irreversible changes can happen due to climatic changes. Federov states that since the last glacial advance, there has been less marked climatic changes, and 1,000 years ago, the temperature of the North Polar region was higher than it is today, and the limit of sea ice was further north than it is at present. So this is what facilitated voyages to Greenland. Because of the possibility of voyages from Europe to England, communities survived here for several centuries. Greenland is an island in the North Pole. But later on, it is said that this settlement became extinct. Now, what led to the extinction of this settlement? A fall in temperature and a southward extension of sea ice later prevented voyages. It extended the area of land ice in Greenland, which eventually led to the complete destruction of the settlement in Greenland. Now, this is a good example for us to understand how certain irreversible changes can happen due to climatic changes. From there, he moves on to explain what are the factors responsible for such long period changes. They can be classified as external and internal. External factors include variations in the quantity of radiations emitted by the sun or the changes in the Earth's orbit around the sun, whereas internal factors may include formation and movement of continental areas, growth of mountain ranges, volcanic activity that produces gas and dust, and anything that alters the transparency and characteristics of the atmosphere. It is good to remember that there is a balance in the composition of atmosphere and hydrosphere, which is essential for the sustainability of the resources on the Earth. Anything that alters the transparency and the characteristics of this atmosphere and hydrosphere can lead to long period changes. Now, coming to the effects of human existence on nature, on one end where there are natural changes, the other end there are changes that our existence bring on to the planet. There are certain very important impacts or relevant impacts that can lead to climatic changes, which can be classified into impacts on land or transformation of land surface, changes in water balance, and the changes in energy balance. What are the ways in which we transform the land? We are very familiar with the widespread forest clearance that is happening throughout the world in the name of progress. Another factor that can transform the land surface is ploughing up steppes and great plains. Ploughing means tilting or loosening up the soil. Steppes are grasslands, extensive or vast grasslands in many parts of the world where you see no trees. When these are being ploughed up for agricultural purposes, we are transforming the land surface. Land reclamation, using different types of land for specific human purposes. Reclamation comes from the word reclaim. Construction of man-made lakes and reservoirs, and conversion of large areas to built-up environment. By built-up environment, we mean the areas that we change to build cities, roads, bridges, or other things that we need. Now, why are these transformations significant? They alter the reflectivity of the Earth's surface, or they create a kind of roughness on the Earth's surface. This in turn changes the energy balance, which eventually changes the circulation patterns, leading to climatic changes. The second important change or impact that can be resulted due to human activity are the changes in water balance. Now, how do we change the water balance? Huge proportion of river discharge is now being used for irrigation and industrial needs. As more and more water is used for irrigation and industrial needs on the land, there is an increased evaporation rate over land areas. Consequently, the runoff into the oceans decreases. Now, what do we mean by runoff? Runoff in hydrology refers to the quantity of water discharged in surface streams. It includes the water that travel over the land surface and also that infiltrates a soil surface to reach a stream. So when evaporation rate increases, the runoff rate decreases. So the water balance can be changed. It is equally important to remember that evaporation condensation, freezing of moisture are all significant elements in the energy balance. These changes will lead to a different relationship between the various elements of the cycle in different geographical regions. The third impact factor are the changes in energy balance. Now, the most important factor that contributes to the changes in energy balance is the carbon dioxide released by fossil fuel combustion. Now, fossil fuels, as you are all familiar, the three primary varieties of fossil fuels are coal, oil, also called petroleum, and natural gas. Burning of these fossil fuels releases huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The natural processes cannot absorb them completely, leaving more than half of this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide is considered to be one of those greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming, causing the average surface temperature of the earth to rise. Now, the second factor that can cause change in energy balance is the direct release of sensible heat due to power generation. In any power generation process, there is the emission of heat into the environment. And use of all types of energy for progress by mankind can cause changes in energy balance. All these changes or all these activities have the ability to change the Earth atmosphere heat balance. As I said earlier, there is a balance existing between the Earth and the atmosphere in terms of heat as well. When this balance is destroyed, it can lead to adverse climatic conditions. Such changes also alter the transparency of the atmosphere. After explaining to us what is climate and what are the possible implications and impact of all human activities, Federov moves on to state the strategies that human beings can try to avoid adverse consequences. Adverse means harmful consequences. The changes that these procedures can bring in may be local, regional, or global. Because of this, it is essential that we develop a clear strategy to deal with these possible adverse consequences. And he very strongly advocates that only long-term actions will enable man to avoid adverse consequences. Short-term plans might make the life of human beings easier, but they will not help us sustain the precious resources on the environment. And he reminds us that it has to start in the very near future. Because these changes may be local, regional, or global, the strategies to deal with such changes must also include measures taken on regional or global scales. After pointing out the necessity to resort to strategies, he points out that it is also important to have an assessment of the consequences of the different types of natural or man-induced climatic changes. So he points out again that the climatic changes can either be natural or unintentional, or it can be induced by the deliberate activities of mankind. Now, this assessment has to be made considering the social and the economic impact by taking estimates for the years or for the decades that lie ahead of us on the probable characteristics of agriculture, water supplies, and industry for future decades. It is important to consider the social and economic implications these assessments can have before this strategy is being planned. The third element, he states, is the recommendations on how to avoid adverse consequences. This include the recommendations that can be considered to avoid adverse consequences, like the fuel and energy use should be reduced. This is a recommendation which he considers is one of the elements of this strategy. And why are such recommendations important? They are aimed at the preservation of the present climate. Federov also mentions that we need not be pessimistic about bringing in widespread changes because the possibilities science and technology offers are immense. But he strongly argues that there is an urgent need for the development of appropriate strategy, and peace, disarmament, and international cooperation should provide the foundation for such a strategy. The great message that he gives through this essay is to think globally and act locally. When he talks about the global implications and the global strategies, he is pointing to the international support and cooperation we need in this regard. He also mentions World Weather Watch in this essay. World Weather Watch is the backbone program of World Meteorological Organization. He winds up the essay driving home the fundamental understanding that weather systems and patterns do not recognize national boundaries. Each one of us inhabiting this planet has a responsibility of protecting its natural resources and doing our little bit towards avoiding adverse climatic changes. International cooperation is paramount, as no one country can be fully self-sufficient in the provision of all weather, water, and climate-related services. This alone can make man survive on this planet, minimizing adverse effect. Reminding each one of us once again of the need and the necessity to think globally and act locally, which Federov strongly advocates through this essay. Thank you.